Alright, let's talk about PvP in a Division 2. It's a topic that I've been avoiding on my channel since launch, pretty much. And that has a few reasons. I'm not gonna name them all now. But today, I am finally going to talk about PvP, which is going to make some players happy and some players not so happy. So yeah, it's not scripted. I just wanna talk about the PvP a little bit. I'm not gonna suggest or push for changes because I feel like that's just not useful. I just want to share my thoughts pretty much. That's all. Because, you know, I think that the PvP in a Division 2 is pretty bad. But I don't think that it is bad because of some talents or some builds or, you know, some things that seem too strong. Or maybe some checkpointers. Sure, there are some minor annoyances that those type of things bring to the game. But it's not really the big issue, I feel like. Because the Division 1 had a lot of those small things that made the game a little bit less enjoyable in PvP. Builds that were OP, some OP skills here and there. You know, we had a lot of annoying metas with the Division 1, but I could still have a lot of fun with the PvP in the Division 1. And I feel like that with the Division 2, that is just simply not the case. And for me to have fun with the game, many systems need to be overhauled completely. And first of all, I don't think that's ever going to happen. And second of all, I don't think a lot of people want that to happen. The developers probably don't want to overhaul it because this is the system that they've been working towards. This is what they want for the game. And a lot of players who currently enjoy the system that are in place probably also don't want an overhaul. So I'm not going to sit here and ask for changes or specific things. I'm just going to explain in this video why I really don't enjoy PvP and why I've already kind of given up on it, to be honest. Because, you know, there's a point with video games where you can say, all right, this game is fun. You know, I'm having fun with this game. But it could still be better by changing X, Y, and Z. And for me, that was the case with the Division 1's PvP. You know, the game wasn't perfect. We had a lot of broken things, especially when the game just came out. But over time, it grew a little better and better. And there was a point, you know, between patch 1.4 and in between patch 1.7 where I think the PvP was kind of good for the Division 1. I think a lot of players can agree to that. So yeah, there's a point where you could say, okay, the game's not perfect, but it's still fun. But then there's also a point with other video games where the game would have to be so different at its core for you to enjoy it that I think it's just better as an individual to accept that maybe the game simply isn't for you. And for me personally, I think the Division 2 is definitely in that ballpark. I don't think I'll ever enjoy the PvP in the Division 2 simply because of the way that it is set up. The game is definitely not bad. It has a lot of gear to collect and some of that gear has some really interesting talents, but the PvP gameplay itself is just such a shallow experience that no matter the build or no matter the environment that I play it in, could be the Dark Zone, could be Occupied or Conflict, it is just not fun or engaging, and I don't think that will ever change, no matter what type of gear they add to the game, because again, it's not the gear that's the issue. So what do I mean by a shallow experience then? Well, that's that there's absolutely no playmaking mechanics in this game whatsoever. There is very little that a player can learn, that a player can practice, or that a player can do to improve his gameplay other than simply having a better build. And as a result, every PvP fight in this game goes down in the same way. Two players press their skills, then they see each other, they start aiming at each other, they shoot each other, and then one of them dies and the other one doesn't die. That's literally how every fight goes in this game. And while you could say, well, all shooters have that, don't they? I mean, at the end of the day, that is what shooter games are about. You shoot guns at each other. But I'd have to disagree with that because, you know, let's look at some other games, and we're going to look at other shooters here because that's really how this game feels in PvP. It doesn't feel like an RPG at all, but that's another topic. But yeah, let's look at some other shooters. For example, Halo. You know, every map in the game of Halo has power weapons all across the map that you can collect. The battles themselves include strafing and jumping really high to like dodge bullets and outplay each other. There are shortcuts all around the map. It has highly vertical gameplay and, you know, we can just keep going on. We have Rainbow Six Siege, which has destructible environments, deeply complex maps, and a one-hit headshot system to reward really good aim. It has interesting gadgets that really force different strategies upon the opponents and force them to switch their playstyle from round to round. And systems like that really allow players to practice and practice and practice and get better at the game and better at the game and better at the game. Battlefield has vehicular combat, aerial combat, destructible environments, and massive 64-player servers, which, even though it isn't as competitive, it can still be intense. Titanfall has wall running, fast movement that allow you to outplay the opponents just through movement alone. Same can be said for Apex Legends. And then I look at the Division 2 PvP and Conflict, and what does that really offer? I'll let you know what it offers. 4 players spawn in, they run to the middle of the map, they use all their skills before the fight, which is most likely going to be the deflector drone, because that's one of the only skills that's actually useful, and then they face tank each other until somebody dies. It could be with an assault rifle, an SMG, an LMG, or a rifle, or maybe even with a sniper, but that's basically the whole game. All the skills in the game you have to press before a fight starts because they're too slow and too clunky to do anything mid-fight. And the movement is so slow that while shooting each other, even the most potato players can hit 95% of their bullets. Because the movement is so slow, it's almost impossible not to hit. And the DZ is pretty much the exact same, but it is slower than Conflict because you have more time in between fights. And sometimes the opponents also do not shoot back because you kill them from behind. How exciting. But yeah, let's pause the video here, I guess, for a second, because I don't want to turn this video into an endless rant. I actually want to keep this a somewhat proper video and just really calmly go over the Divisions 2 PvP point by point and compare it to the Division 1 and how the Division 1 was different in some ways that made the PvP more fun. Even though, yeah, we can all admit that the balancing with the Division 1 PvP was also way off. There were some stupid mechanics, I guess, but it was still fun. This is not a video about balancing or which gear sets are the best. This is just a video looking at the fundamentals, I guess. So yeah, let's look at the Division 1. For example, the skills and talents, the thing I just talked about. In the Division 1, no matter what patch we played in, there were always mechanics in the game that allowed experienced players to get an edge over opponents simply through mechanical skill. And I'm not talking about the OP builds, about the Alpha Bridge builds or whatever. I'm simply talking about some talents and skills in the game that had some mechanics to them that allowed the better players to get more use out of them than the players that weren't so good. Patch 1.4 and patch 1.5 are one example where we had critical save and on the move, which gave damage resistance to the player for 10 seconds if he either managed to pop a medkit in his last health segment or kill a target while moving. Those things aren't super hard to do, but it's not something that everybody was always capable of doing. Popping a medkit in your last health segment was a risk, and it gave a decent reward. This is why everybody in the Dark Zone, everybody that played PvP, pretty much ran with this talent 90% of the time, even after its nerf in patch 1.6. And the same goes for on the move. Killing a downed agent while moving isn't the hardest thing to do, but it gave you a pretty decent buff for about 10 seconds, which then made you a little bit stronger versus the second player you were fighting. It had some interesting mechanics that the better a player was, the more use he could get out of that. Patch 1.6 or patch 1.7, which is seen as some of the best PvP patches by many players, despite the fact that we had one-shot Seeker Mines. I mean, in this patch we had this mechanic where everybody ran a high-end build with the refreshed mask, and then everybody would use the first aid skill to pop it in the last segment while they were trading damage with another player at the same time. So was this super hard to do? Not really, but it required some practice, it took some skill, and it was always a risk to do, since if you're doing it too late, well, that would result in a death, but doing it right, it rewarded the player with a stronger heal, because you got the heal in the last segment. This was a fun mechanic for most PvP players. Same with the support station instant pop. Place it on the ground, trade some damage and pop it at the last second to get the most value out of Unforgiving. Or let's talk about the recovery link in both group and solo. In group you could use the recovery link to clutch save some teammates. But if you were a potato and weren't paying attention, well, that means your teammate is now dead. And if you played solo, you could use the unkillable frames that you got for about 1 second when this thing procced to trade damage at just the right time, which then allowed really experienced solo players that knew what they were doing to take a fight that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to kill maybe 2 or 3 players. These were all mechanics that of course you could combine with each other, integrate into builds, make your build around. And it could make it so that if you were skilled enough and experienced enough with these mechanics, you could make it work with any build, really. You could make it work with purple gear, which I showcased many, many times on stream. And this is what I refer to as the outplay mechanics that the Division 1 have. And I think that's something that every PvP game needs to keep it interesting. You know, it's a little trend with the things that I mentioned earlier. By the way, all of these things got nerfed at some point or taken away. The first aid got changed to where you cannot use it while shooting anymore. Critical save and on the move had their values halved. The insta-pop on the support station now requires the support station to be on the floor for 10 seconds. Only the recovery link, unkillable frames, stayed in the game, but I think that's just because of technical reasons more than anything. So yeah, these things got taken away, and the Division 2 continued this trend and pushed this all the way to 11 in regards of talents and skills. Now, how many skills or talents do we have that we can activate mid-fight to make a play to outplay the opponent? We have 0. We have absolutely 0. All skills have to be pressed before a fight because of the slow cast time, and even in what the skills do, the way that they work, they don't allow for much outplay mechanic. They just allow you to tank a couple more bullets in the case of the deflector drone, or tank a couple more bullets in the case of the cam launcher. Or what is everybody running anyway in PvP, you know? The healer drone, you know, tank a little bit more damage that way. And this makes the PvP experience, in my opinion, just very dull at its core. As even the more skilled players have no means to do anything better than the opposing players, other than simply having a better build equipped that does more damage and also tanks more damage. And you might say, well, that's how a game like this is supposed to work. This is a game that's about builds, you know, putting your gear together and then making yourself stronger. So builds should be the determining factor that decides who's going to win a gunfight. And even though I think that that shouldn't be 100% the case, even in a game like this, even if I would agree to that argument, then I'd have to say, well, we have normalization, which then takes a lot of what is important about a build away from those builds and pushes everybody very close together. So now we have a game where skill doesn't really matter and the builds also don't really matter. And then you might respond with, well, isn't that what's good? You know, have a more fair environment. And then I'd have to say, well, sure, I'm okay with a completely fair environment. You know, I think that this is where a lot of people misunderstand me, because they think I want to run around with a super OP build and kill all the new players in the Dark Zone. And while I did that on occasion, let's not lie.
Guys like you ruin the game, man.
Yeah, man. Because
we're cheating.
Yeah.
It's a game. You don't have to cheat. If you can't win fair, then don't play. Everybody is using the RPM glitch and everything.
Oh, you're cheating, man. Look at that. You're still alive. Oh! Cheat, man. I didn't shoot and I killed you. You see? It's cheat.
If you can't win, don't play.
I mean, as funny as that is to me, that's not why I played the PvP. You know, I would be 100% fine if in the Dark Zone or in Conflict everybody had the exact same build. The exact same build. It would be a little bit boring, but I would be okay with it. You know, if that's what Normalization did, I would be fine with it. But then I would also want everybody to have these mechanics, these skills and these talents that allow for playmaking. I would be fine if everybody had the same build, if we had critical save on the move, if we had insta-pop for the support station, or having a heal while ADSing, just to name a couple of examples that I got from the Division 1. Obviously, those exact things wouldn't work for the Division 2, but, you know, you get the point. I wouldn't hate it if everybody was the same, it's just that everybody has about the same build now, and there's nothing you can do to change the outcome of a fight. And nothing is a little bit of an overestimate. Of course, there's always potatoes who just sit in cover and just chill there. And better players are still going to rack up more kills. But there's almost nothing. Let's just put it like that. You know, sure, I can probably play 1 or 2 hours of just memeing around with my friends, which is what I've been doing, you know, here and there. But beyond that, no, it just gets boring. But I don't want to linger around specific examples too long for this video, because this isn't a video that's trying to change things. I'm just sharing my opinion. So instead of just talking about more examples, I also want to talk about some other points. And that's the environment that we play PvP in. Most notably, the way that the Dark Zones are set up. So yeah, let's talk about the Dark Zones a little bit. Now with the turret and the normalization and the rogue cooldown and the removal of VoIP, it is clear that the developers had one goal in mind going into the Division 2. And that's to reduce the toxicity and reduce the PvPing and reduce the ganking that happened a lot in the Dark Zone in the Division 1. Are the developers successful in their goal? Well, yes and no. I don't believe that the current systems in place help to prevent toxicity or ganking, but I do also think that we see less ganking and toxicity in the Dark Zone. But that's more because PvP players don't really care to play the Dark Zone anymore, I think. Of course you're going to see less ganking, less PvP and less toxicity if there are less players to play PvP to begin with. I find it hard to put words to it, but I'll just try to show you. You know, we have checkpoint turrets, we have normalization, and we have all those things. And you can still bully players just as easily in the Dark Zone. You can still gank them from behind when they're farming. You can still group up and then farm solo players in front of the safe house or in front of the checkpoints even if you have a sniper build. I've done this many times in the Division 2, already did this going as far back as the beta. You know, players still talk shit in the Dark Zone, it's just that this time they stand next to the turrets so that you cannot flag rogue and kill them. So no, I don't think that the current systems do much to prevent the ganking and the toxicity if the gankers, what a word that is, are determined in their goal. The thing that the turrets and the rogue cooldowns and the normalization do prevent though is proper PvP. The PvP that I'm actually interested in. The PvP where both parties want to fight each other simply because it's more fun to fight outnumbered as a rogue than it is to fight some randoms in conflict, right? You go rogue, you go manhunt with your team or alone, and you just see how many players you can take on as they keep coming towards you. That was the fun PvP experience from the Dark Zone, and that's just not in this game because of all these systems that just don't support that type of gameplay. You know, at best you're going to fight a couple people here and there, and fights are going to last like a couple of minutes, but as soon as one dies, he has to wait 2 minutes to go rogue again, and it just gets unorganized very, very fast. There are so many measurements taken here to prevent any proper PvP from happening. But it is still possible and even encouraged to shoot an unsuspecting player in the back and then run your timer off. Which to me, I just don't think that's exciting. Like, oh, I killed somebody and I stole their loot, now I got a rogue timer. I'm such a badass. Let me just run away, let me just run my timer off so I can steal his loot. Yeah. No, that's not what I want to do. You know, that's not why I play Division. But then you could say, all right. I see what you're talking about, Marco. You know, you do have a point. I personally don't care because I don't play PvP, but you do have a point. Well, why don't you just go to the occupied Dark Zone? And here I'm sitting like, I'm glad you asked, because the occupied Dark Zone is way worse. Way worse. Yes, the occupied Dark Zone does not have normalization, and those shock turrets are also not a thing. But it also doesn't have any proper PvP balancing. You know, just an example, when I brought up that you can get shock bullets in the Dark Zone, with the new gear set and then shock enemy players and kill them without them being able to do anything, the response I got was, anything goes in the occupied Dark Zone. And I'm just sitting there like, yeah, wow, that's great. That's not a fun experience. Half of the builds kill you in like 2 or 3 or 4 bullets, which then makes it a cheese fest. And on top of that, there's no rogue mechanic at all. So you could kill somebody and then nothing. So that feeling of you or your squad versus the world versus the server is gone because you're no longer manhunt, and most of the time other players can't even find you if you actually want to hide after a kill. So what ends up happening naturally is you end up fighting in front of checkpoints where everybody can just respawn as soon as they died. And this is just, it looks so silly. It looks so silly, and it doesn't matter if you get a kill or if you die. There's no tension. You respawn, you know, you kill somebody, you kill another guy, you shoot again, you die, or you go back into the checkpoint to restock. It's exactly like Conflict, but with more players, cheesier builds, and more of a mess. It still doesn't make the PvP experience fun. So yeah, on top of the fact that the PvP has no outplay mechanics and the gameplay itself is extremely basic and dull, the environments in the game that allow for PvP to occur are also in one instance set up in a way to prevent any proper PvP from happening, and in the other instance is just an unbalanced, unregulated mess that is only fun if you play with friends and just meme around a little bit with silly builds like a one-shot grenade build or a one-shot sniper build or an LMG that kills you in like 3 bullets, you know, just to have some fun, just to mess around, but nothing serious. And then we've only talked about the DZ so far, because that's the thing that I used to enjoy the most. But can we just talk about conflict for a second and what the actual fuck is going on with that game mode? I've just played a couple games today, just to see if I could, look at it from a different light, maybe, change my mindset about some of these things in PvP. I wanted to play it just one more time to really get a feel for it. And what did I encounter? Plenty of occasions where my damage just didn't register, plenty of occasions where players were just teleporting around because, I don't know, they were stuck in some weird animation. I figured out that my skill build, my healer build, doesn't actually work in conflict because the normalization lowers my skill power values and my mods are therefore not unlocked. So now I need to make a separate build for normalized as well, which is just another thing that adds to the frustration. And then there's also the spawns. Spawns are still not fixed, and there's still plenty of times when I or my teammates spawn behind the enemies if we die to the enemies. And it is just a mess. There's this mechanic where you cannot throw nades or cannot throw skills into an enemy spawn, which is the spawn protection, right? And that's, I guess, a good thing to prevent them from being spawn camped too hard. But if you walk into that spawn and then walk back, the game will automatically flip the spawns, which then means that the enemy cannot use skills or grenades in their own spawn, but you can spam skills and throw grenades in their spawn and spawn camp them that way. You can use the spawn protection against the enemy. It is like, there is just so much wrong with the PvP in this game. And there's nothing that I can hold on to for me to take this game seriously. And it wasn't like that with the Division 1. What I could do with the Division 1, I could log in daily, and I could go into the DZ, and I could play. I could practice. I could try to get better at the game. I could take PvP somewhat serious, practice the medkit timings, the movement, the aim, practice using skills. And even when I'm streaming some solo memeing, I guess, that still resulted in an interesting experience for myself and for anybody else watching. When you play everything right and you get those 3 or 4 kills because you used all your talents and skills in the right way, stuff like that, that's entertaining. You got the kills, your hard work paid off, and that made me want to keep playing the Division 1. And that is just missing from the Division 2. And this is something that I already said in my beta review, that the PvP in the Division 2 just doesn't have that. It can be fun for a couple hours, sure, just to mess around a little bit, but it definitely doesn't have that long-term staying power for me. And if I'm being honest, I already got to the point with the Division 2 where I'm kind of done, and I'll just come back to the game when there are PvE updates in between. And it's not because the game is lacking content. The game has plenty of content. But without PvP, I simply have no reason to farm for gear in this game other than to get a somewhat decent build for the raid. I don't care if I can beat the stronghold under 5 minutes on challenge mode or heroic mode, unless the mission is fundamentally different and a new experience on the harder difficulties. Why would I care for a higher difficulty? It's just NPCs that are more tanky and that do more damage. I don't think that's content that I'm missing out on. I don't feel proud if I completed a challenge mode mission or heroic mode mission. I'm not like, wow, I'm such a good gamer. I don't get that. I don't get that at all from PvE. It's just like I play PvE so I can farm gear that I can use then in PvP. But if I don't want to play PvP because the PvP isn't fun, then I also don't have to make perfect builds or farm for builds. It's that simple. It's that simple. And I could make a million videos on things that I would like to see improved with this game. But honestly, I think the whole experience is just dumbed down so much and so fundamentally uninteresting that, again, it would require major overhauls for it to be even slightly entertaining in the long run. And as I said, no one's waiting for that. The devs aren't gonna do it. The biggest part of the player base are like, hell no, because you'll fuck up PvE. We might get stuff like a rogue timer in the Occupied Dark Zone. Give it a few months, we'll see stuff like that. But I don't see them reworking the skills or the talents just to make PvP more interesting. So best case scenario, Division 3. Maybe that will have interesting PvP. Who knows? I feel like the PvP in this game was made to please the PvE players and the more casual audience. And as a result, the more hardcore player base that likes PvP isn't going to play it. And the PvE audience is still not going to play PvP because they don't like PvP to begin with. So now no one is enjoying the PvP. No one is a big word, but you get the point. I know that what I'm gonna say probably isn't true, but I just feel like this whole game was made as a big fuck you to any PvP player or to anybody that actually wants to get good at a game. It is just so dumbed down. It is unbelievable. But yeah, I'm gonna stop ranting about this now. I wanted to keep this a constructive video, but I guess I started to go down the ranting path. But let me know how you all feel about this. Are you gonna grind endlessly for slightly better builds just so you can clear PvE content 2 minutes faster? Are you enjoying PvP enough to actually make builds for it and play it in the long run? Am I really just maybe burned out with this game? Like, it could truly be the case. I honestly do not know at this point anymore. I don't. I just feel like the PvP is so boring in this game. Not to mention broken, but that can be fixed. It's just so boring. That's the issue. Anyway, as always, guys, I will see you all later. Or, like they say in the Netherlands, zie je later.